products. I wanted to just show you really quick. There's a mood board. Water was our theme. We got to that through many meetings. And from there, we created a whole suite of graphics that would work on multiple phone platforms or iPod phone, I sorry, the iPad, forgive me for that, and would work at scale, would work at every retailer because the trick is everybody wants the same SKU, the number one SKU, which is usually black, but they want their exclusives. So, how do you make an exclusive for 50 different stores and they all want the same one? So that is the magic of CMF. So what we did is we took the art direction, we created product graphics. You can see how here this is a solid color. These were the graphics layered on top of it. It was my idea to use laser etching to finish out the graphics instead of screen printing because of durability. And these were also TPU cases, so they were very flexible. They were not rigid. And here I wanted to just point out this in black, the same graphic looks like eel skin. If you put it with a blue background or a blue palette, it looks like water bubbles. And that again is to me like what's so exciting about CMF is that you can take all of these components and mix them together and they create a completely different look. Oh, the water and bubbles. So this was just the theme for the graphic patterns, and we use biomimicry because at the time, Apple retail, I would have to meet with Apple and present, all of our strategies, and they said, "Well, we don't do fashion, we're technology," and so I had to create a concept for Apple to accept that was still fashiony, that had to do with the trends because CMF designers have to research trends and translate them into the product through color, material, and finish. And so I came up with biomimicry. And that's how we got animal prints, like leopard skin, like all of the different animal prints that are always popular into the graphic palette. So we'll talk about trend research a little bit. So I learned this from working at Nike. At Nike, we had a team of people called the Color Committee, and this was back then. Now I think it's called the Center for Color Excellence. There's a brand new name for it, but it's just a committee of people who decide what are the color palettes going to be for Nike. It's usually 90 colors. There's maybe 10 core neutrals that transfer every year that don't go out of style. You use them day in and day out. But then, the culture changes and consumer preferences change. And so as CMF designers, we have to really understand the changes. We need to understand the timing of these trends, and then we need to implement them into our concepts or into our strategies. This is an example of all the trend services that I was able to purchase for Apple iPhone or the iPod. We called it just mobility, and we used it for our foundation to create the concepts that we did that you're going to see in the upcoming slides. We called this color intelligence. And I mean, it really is intelligence because right here on the right, I mean, this is 1 and the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 services. I learned how to purchase services from working on the Nike Color Committee. So I represented my division, which was the equipment division at the time. And that training brought me over to Belkin and showed how to research trends. So this is about $50,000 worth of trend services. This is not a must. Most companies do not spend any money on trend services. So the fact that I was able to get the CEO of the company to give me, give my department $50,000 to buy these trends was a huge achievement. And these trends informed all of the color, material, and styling directions that we did for the entire world. Here they are from different angles. I think I had 3 interns at the time, and we took all the color swatches from all the color trends, and I had them plotted on big 4x8 gator foam. This is just a screenshot of it, but this is to show and really, what's the word? It is to witness the trends. So you can actually see how a color goes from light to dark and so on. It's essentially a hue analysis. And this is what we did. We had to prove this to the CEO so that way he understood where the money was going. A lot of times, as CMF designers, we're just going in there, we're using our Pantone chips, we're starting to design stuff, but we don't actually realize, like, the money's coming from somewhere. And to sit in this chair, you have to make the company money. So there is a return on investment for every single action that you take. This is my method explained. This is what I showed Apple Retail. You can see here there's trends right here where you can have it starts from 2007, 2010. What do you see as far as the trends? This is literally the slide I showed Apple Retail. Apple Retail, they're not designers, they're MBAs. They're all about the finances. And you would think that people who are buying product to go into the retail space, that they have a design sense. They do, but their degree is in finance. So I had to explain things to them in the way that they would understand, because otherwise they would just be critical of the color. I've had them say some pretty insulting things about color palettes, and you're going to hear a lot of bad feedback too, so that's for later on. But anyway, you can see here that purples were trending up, and that is the whole visual here, the snapshot. And so from this, since it is trending up, I recommended purple, and we were the first product group to introduce purple into the Apple store. So we were on trend. Okay, strategy. So I know I only have about 20 minutes for this whole thing, so I apologize. Um, this shows how we started after the trend services. We needed inspiration. This is the first Avatar movie. This was way back then. I think we are on 3 Avatar movies now. But back then, bioluminescence and these really cool blue effects, like that was everywhere. And so we use this as a cultural touch point and foundation that would help our trend process. And again, going back to water, we used water as a theme because it takes shape of everything. And our team, our mantra was "Be like water," which was a Bruce Lee, because we were under really intense constraints, time constraints, everything. The team was in China like 4 times that year trying to get like everything developed. And so we had to, like Bruce Lee says, be like water. Be like a cup. Water is, I don't know, I'm botching it up, but water in a cup is like a cup, is like the shape of a cup. And then biomimicry, again, I was talking about that earlier, how we were able to get fashion prints, animal prints. And then we got into concept design. This is a palette that I created for the entire iPhone business. You can see here we have pearlescence, we have solids and translucents. I won't get into that, but this was basically the palette that I had to produce that went on every single product for Apple iPhone and iPad and iPod. We did have a key accent color, which is the aqua and lagoon color, which is the color of water. And we use that as our primary color on every product. So every product launch, we had to have this aqua color. The translucent, I made like different symbols, and that's because we made everything into a pearlescent, a solid, and a transparent translucent. So one color, 4 different effects. And you can see here how like the color palette takes place on an assortment of products. We made plenty of colors. And going back to the biomimicry, and this was the first lineup. This was all for the Apple Store. They use the most premium finishes. You have to think about price points as well. In industrial design, you're kind of limited by the tooling. The price of a product is going to come from the tooling cost. But CMF, you can make that cost even higher and more premium because you're adding paints, you're adding different materials, different effects, different secondary finishing processes. And that's the stuff that really creates a lot of desire and marketing for those products as well. And I had time to do some materials innovation where we had to create a seamless, stitchless armband to put the phone in. And so at the time, you're just looking at sports fabrics. I found a really great vendor in Taiwan that made TPU hot melt. It is the same material that is on Louis Vuitton bags. So you know the brown bag with the logos. The this material, the top skin is the same that you would find on that bag, which I thought was really cool. Also used on a luxury brand, and you can see how there's the wavy patterns on the graphic is sorry, the wavy pattern on the armband, and that was from the water. So oh, one more slide. Well, we got 10 more. So prototyping, sorry. So after we got the, we did the graphics, we had to go into prototyping phase. These were a bunch of concept samples that I had to present to the CEO and say, okay, these are all the different concepts that we have made. This is more of a proof of concept. We did some experimentation with the prototyper, and this is what they could look like. Because right at this moment, everything was still in digital phase. So this is where we start making it real. And we just use iPhone cases from previous launches to give it the form. Um, Again, the targets, this is part of the development, a lot of the things that I did with the painters. And here's an example of a render and what a sample looks like. And this is a very long, drawn out process, which I won't get into, but this is basically a milestone. And then here are spec sheets, which you're going to have to end up creating to go to the suppliers. And these are development samples. And you can see how they're pearlescent, they're solid, they have laser etching, and they also have like the transparent. So the final product, this is, I believe, the last slide, and you can see how like is a launch that was pretty intact. This was a global launch. It went to every retailer in the universe, and they all needed it at the same time. Different materials, different form factors, and a unifying CMF. Oh, sorry. One last thing. I was involved a lot in the assortment planning because my team was creating all of the color ups. We had to create the price points that I was talking about earlier. You can see how there's different pricing at the top versus at the bottom. And depending on the amount of finish you would add to it, that would increase the price because, of course, the manufacturing price made it more expensive, but it made it more interesting and more exclusive. And that's how we phased that. And the goal for the sales team was to get 9 pegs. So that's why there are 9 vertical iPhones, and then everything wave 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. That was the refresh strategy because no everybody's wants different colors, and retailers and their customers, people are always looking for the next new thing. And so this was part of the merchandising and assortment strategy that I had to help the sales team and the product team with, to help them plan their production for the entire year. So that was one example of, I'm going to go ahead and stop, of showing, from start to finish, like what CMF is. And I'm really curious if any of you thought it would be that expansive. So that is about me. Um, and this also just goes into like, this is CMF as a discipline. I like to show that I'd like to act every day that's as CMF as a discipline, because a lot of times we get pushed into styling roles. And yes, we do have to do styling, but a lot of the work that we have to do is strategy, and it informs the entire architecture, the entire product process. And I don't think people realize that on the external world, and as well as universities. Universities don't think of CMF at all in that way. And I will make that as a blanket statement because I have worked with a lot of them, and I have hired many students from international schools as well as domestic schools. So I know from my experience that CMF is just something that's really not talked about very much. But I have to tell you, when I am on a project and we have the project managers, the program managers there, and they're creating their Microsoft projects documents, and they have every single activity and every single person that is in that project. CMF is always critical path. And what I mean by critical path, if you don't know that, it means that this must happen for the project to launch. And if there isn't CMF representative, somebody else is going to do it. And generally it's industrial design, just because that's what it falls into. But CMF, if you have the opportunity and the latitude at your company, you can take over the entire process. And I say that, with a smile on my face because I mean, we're the ones who have to think about the nuances. We think about the architecture. We think about these details. And I don't, from my experience, I don't believe the industrial design, function looks at it to this depth. And that's why, for me, and from my career standpoint, CMF is a discipline. It starts at the very beginning at the kickoff and ends when it launches, because there's other product processes and other delivery activities that you're not even taught in school right now. You'll learn that as you start working. All right, so I think that I've covered about me, the CMF as a discipline, and I'm just going to show one more visual to segue into the GKM roadmap. How are we doing on time? Just double checking.
We're good. You can go ahead.
Okay, great. So I will show when I mean GKM. A lot of companies use GKM as gatekeeping meeting. Other companies call this roadmap dates and gates, or they call it a roadmap. I created this a while back, gosh, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, for a project, just to show like what the phases were for a client. And I actually gave this to a former graduate from NID. She went on to go to the Royal College of Art, I believe, for her master's, and she asked me for some help. And I sent this to her, and I don't think she got it. She never responded back. So this is something, please, like, I know you're learning art, but really design is about solving problems. And when you're launching a project or a product, you will have lots of problems. And this is the stuff that we don't think about, but or we're not taught in school at the in terms of a degree standpoint. So, product creation process. So, generally, when you enter a company and you sit in the chair and you have your role and your title, you start your first project and you have a roadmap like this. They may look different. This will also show like why CMF is critical path for a process. The kickoff starts with research and inspiration, and then we have design. I don't know if you see my cursor. Okay, great. So this is research and inspiration. We have design, development, manufacturing, and sales and distribution. The presentation I showed you touched on every single phase of that, even the sales and distribution. So in research and inspiration, you're going to have a trend direction. You're going to have color, material, finish directions, and print and pattern directions. I mean, this is very simple stuff. It can get deeper and more detailed, but generally speaking, when you start a project, um, you have all of the stakeholders, you have everybody in the meeting, and they look at you and you're the CMF designer, and they're like, okay, when can we get this trend direction? When can we get the CMF direction? When can we get, it's all of these deliverables. So these are the things that you start thinking about in the research and inspiration phase. Design phase, that's when you start creating concepts from all of that strategy work and all that research work that you just did. And from there, you can create the concepts. This is where you get into visualizations. You start using Keyshot, you start using Viscom, you start using Photoshop. This is where you have your design reviews, where you meet with the stakeholders and your design leadership, and they want to look at your concepts, and usually you show them divergent concepts, meaning three different concepts or more, depending on the organization. And from there you narrow down on a concept, and then you do another, branching out into more concepts to get to the final concept. And then we also do the design prototyping. So I showed you a bunch of painted samples. That is part of the design process. We just call that the prototyping phase. For development. After you get everything signed off, the business leaders, the executive team is like, yes, 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 we're doing this. This is the concept. You move into design finalization gate. You start creating spec sheets, and then you move into development or the commercialization phase. So in this phase for development, you start doing the spec sheets, which I showed you an example of. You start color matching the bulk materials, and then you start reviewing all of the samples that come in, whether they be injection molded or cut and sew, however they're constructed. You can look at them in a component setting, or you can look at them in a full build. So this is the phase where you're generally working with the factories, and most CMF designers stop here. They give the Pantone chip or the the painted plaque or whatever that control sample that um, color target is, and by the way, you can specify anything as a color target. You will get into lots of arguments about this going forward, but a color target can be a post-it if this is the right color blue. It can be an Apple, iPod or iPhone earpod thing if it's the right white. I've When I worked at Nike, I used the tip of a Uniball pen for a pink color because I couldn't find the color. So you can send anything to the factory, and then you can argue with them on how to produce it, which is part of my favorite part because a lot of times they say no, and then I have to push them, and then they make it, and then we win Red Dot awards, and everybody's happy. So development. So okay, so after you get through the color matching, then from there you can go into bulk production and start the mold trials, which is this manufacturing phase. This is where a lot of CMF designers don't really do this kind of work. It's usually handed off to the engineering team. But this is the rub. A lot of companies don't have CMF engineers, so you end up doing the work. And from my career, I came in as a color developer because that was my job at Nike. So I developed all the materials for the watch bands and the bezels, for the product. And from there, that's where I learned a lot of these practices. And I just brought that into my design activities. So I'm kind of a unique blend where I do end to end. I do the design and the development. And that wasn't by choice, that was really by necessity because when I worked at Nike, there were maybe only like five CMF designers in the entire company. So, now there's 35, 40, 50. I mean, they have parsed it out so much that you don't even get to design your own materials. You have to just do color. So anyway, that's manufacturing. And then sales and distribution. I have gone on to meet with the retailers, the Apple store, those kind of, big box retailers. That's what they call them in the United States. And because the salespeople and the product people didn't know how to talk about trend or design or the things that we were designing, I would have to fly with them and present our concepts to these buyers. And because of that, we earned their trust. And I was appointed a color advisor to two major retailers in the United States, which afforded me like an opportunity to influence the retail buyers. So just to explain really quick, I had a senior buyer at Target, which is a retailer here in the United States, and they love the color that I created so much for a mouse that they told Logitech, they told all of the other brands that were in their aisle at Target to make the color that I picked. So that's the type of influence that you have, doing these types of activities. Okay, so and then as well, sorry for manufacturing, I don't have this here, but you have to do QC and a lot of the governance. Excuse me, a lot of the governance type of activities where we have limit samples and so on. So okay, here we are. Sorry. Okay, so as far as the visuals, those are it. I mean, I can show more projects, but just to get into career paths, that was like my next topic. So are we ready to go there, or would you like to see any more work?
We would love to see more, but I think we're running short on time.
Oh, you would see it later. Is that what you said?
We're actually running short on time, but
You're
we
short
would
on
love
time.
to see it later.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, no problem. How just give me a time check. We were get into career paths, some salaries and brands that invest. Are we good to do that for a few minutes?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what I just showed you guys was the gatekeeping meeting. So you're just going to see those kind of things in your meetings with the cross-functional team. Career paths. So in the United States, I'm not sure how it is in other countries. We generally go into product or transportation. The way that the schools are set up here, they kind of force you to take those paths. Just so you know. Um, I did not go to a design school. I went to an engineering school, like I mentioned, and I came into design at Nike from a developer standpoint. And from there, I just created my own systems. But in terms of product, obviously you're working on consumer goods, like anything that's not a car, anything that's not transportation. So anything that doesn't have four wheels or more on it is considered product. And then there's transportation. Obviously, it's all the car companies. So generally speaking, those are the two lanes that you go into, and then from there you interview at companies based on those experiences. Okay, and then as far as the salary, the roles, I just wanted to say when I was doing CMF, they were creating positions and salaries for my job description when I was at Nike. They didn't have that. Now, CMF roles at car companies, I get recruited for jobs all the time, and I saw a job come in. And at Wemo, which is the autonomous driving car company here in the United States, they were paying senior CMF designers $248,000 a year for a CMF role. That just blew my mind. I think that is such an amazing salary. They're usually half that. But just to show you how much CMF has evolved into a discipline. And before, like I said, $60,000 or if that, and now, you're getting paid quite a bit. So that's just an example. For product roles, they're a little bit less, but you can get into the $100,000 range for product. And you would start off as like, an intern. The path is to start off as an intern if you can get an internship, and then generally speaking, you get hired back to that company from being an intern. And then from there, you go from junior designer, staff designer, associate designer, then up to senior. And then my highest title was principal. I wanted to be on the contributor track. I didn't want to be a manager. Those are two different skill sets. I love CMF. I love practicing CMF, and that's why I went on the principal track, and that's why I do what I do. And then brands that invest in CMF, obviously like a Nike or a footwear company. And then for automotive, I mean, just pick any of them. I know Graves is a big company there. There's, graduates from your school. You have a graduate that went to CCS and that is now at Aston Martin. And so I think there's you guys have some great alumni out there, forging the path. So definitely connect with them. So, okay, I think I went through my six topics. If there's anything else you want me to share, otherwise, we'll go to the next segment.
Yes. Oh, that
Thank
was
you.
so wonderful. Saint will take over now.
Thank you, Vivian. That was so, so, so amazing and informative. And while you were presenting, I was thinking about an iPod that I used to have. So this is 2011 or 10, maybe. I was like about 11 or 12 years old. And I remember having an iPod case that looked eerily similar to the purple that you were showing us. And I started thinking
Probably.
about all the design decisions that you've made that sort of, trickle down and found its way in a store in Bombay in India. And I went and bought the iPod case. So it was pretty amazing to sort of see the decision makers and talk to them and think about the products I cherished growing up.
Oh, thank you for saying
Um,
that. It's an honor. I mean, that's a really big thing for me is that, you make these objects. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you make these
no,
objects
no, go ahead.
that you hold and you keep, and they're part of your life, and so for me, I think that's just really one of the joys that my job has
Mhm.
brought me is to hear feedback like that. Thank you.
No, I really do. I was sort of, I haven't seen that iPod case in a really, really long time, maybe over 15 years, but I do remember it very vividly. And I also remember the grain. I mean, of course, I did not know that CMF is a thing when I was 11, but I remember the grain and the texture um, of the iPod case. But there was so much more appreciated from your presentation. I was really sort of moved by how you described how through your career you've pushed back to sort of understand CMF as a discipline and not just a styling tool, because it is more than that. It's so much more than that. And I also really appreciated how you spoke about how you and your team sort of picked up on sort of global and cultural touch points such as biomimicry and bioluminescence to sort of, create a line of products that sort of hit at the right spot, as the Gen Zers would say. They were hitting the right spot in a moment in time. So thank you for your wonderful and informative presentation. I've got a few questions, and I learned about these from conversation with Anika and Urvi. And I think we would really love to know what you think about. So we're in a moment where AI is everywhere, and we would love to know about what you think about AI and CMF as a discipline. Where do you think it can potentially contribute in a meaningful way, or if you're opposed to the idea, or any thoughts you have on this?
I love this question and thank you. And thank you so much for what you just shared. That means a lot to me. That makes me really happy. Um, AI is everywhere. It's not going away. If you look at it from an investment standpoint, AI is going to be like the number one thing you're going to make your money on, and so on. I am not afraid of AI, not at all, because CMF is a technical discipline. Um, I'm going to quote Elon: people who have to move atoms don't have to worry about AI. And the thing that where I see AI making the biggest impact in CMF is just for visualization and for concept development. I have been on projects where somebody on the staff was like, "Oh, I was in Chat GPT and I asked it to do CMF for me, and here." And it wasn't bad. And I'm not going to knock on AI, because I think, like, I use AI every day. I use multiple AIs. I asked ChatGPT about the future of CMF and AI, and it gave me I challenge all of you to ask ChatGPT or the AIs, what the future is for CMF. But again, I see it affecting a styling, visualization, everything up into a color target. The minute you go from a digital realm, which is all AI, I mean, but AI cannot make it into the physical realm unless you put it into a robot, correct? Um, in a digital realm, it will speed things up. You will be able, like, for example, like I mentioned how I get recruited by companies all the time, like my LinkedIn, like maybe every 2 weeks I have a new project or a new job, opportunity that I'm not I'm either overqualified for or whatever. Um, but I noticed that Nike, as an example, you do not need a CMF degree, or you do not need a degree. These are the things that are changing, what I've noticed. You don't need a designer degree. Instead, you could have experience. Where you get that experience from, that's a whole other, conversation. But they also have, when you read the job description at the bottom, it's like important, but not, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to find, I'm having trouble finding my words right now. It's not required. And that's using Viscom. It's a software. I looked it up. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And it's literally getting you from sketch to a concept. It's messy. It's like, you can't create tooling out of it. You don't have engineering out of it, but you can create the concepts from it. So I'm sorry if I'm taking a long time talking about it, but I just feel like it's really important to not be freaked out by it. Don't be scared by it, because as long as you are going from your digital realm and creating a color, I'm just using this as a color target, to make this product, which I worked on. You may use this, as far as pens. But once you go from a digital to a physical, you need a human to do that. You need the human to work with a prototyper. You need a human to be the prototyper. We have all of this technology and machines, but I don't think it's going to replace CMF. If you're doing a lot of like cognitive work, as an example, as a developer, and you're looking at color evaluations, like I I I wanted to try this. I took a job at Nike as a color developer, and I did it for 2 months. It was not the best job for me, because cognitively, I'm just looking at spreadsheets and I'm looking at LAB values and whether or not it matches in that. That could all be replaced by AI, because it's data. It's lots of data crunching. When you need to create art or have like a human expression, that's where humanity will always win. You'll never have to worry about a robot, being better than you, in my opinion. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. The next thing we were a bit more curious about is to think through the role and the relationship between sustainability and CMF as a discipline, or to sort of paraphrase, we might think about um, what can CMF designers do to sort of think about sustainability more specifically in their work and in their process. If you have any thoughts about that.
I do. Thank you. I realized years ago that CMF is the starting point for all the materials for a product. A lot of times the engineers they'll recommend products, because it has to be a polymer, or, it has to have certain mechanical characteristics if it's going to be tooled. But if you're going to use different types of materials, I think for plastics, you get into recycled and so on. But I think the world is now ready for lots of sustainability, and it's really just the matter of the suppliers commercializing a lot of the materials that will be used. I think the toughest part with sustainability is that you all the materials that you choose have to withstand the rigors of manufacturing. So if you're going to make millions and millions and millions of these units, they have to hold up to manufacturing scale. And I think that is really the toughest part with sustainability. On a different tangent, the solvents that are being used to create a material, all of the ingredients, those kind of factors can be changed. When I worked at Belkin, I had to make a eco-friendly iPhone case. And to do that, it was made from leather. It wasn't made from plastic. I used wool that came from sheep in Italy. And the material, the leather, was colored using nuts and shells and non-toxic. It was all aniline dyed, I believe. I'm sorry, I'm not great on um, the tannery language. Thank you. Sorry, I'm like trying to get to that description. But that is a way that you can use sustainability. I think as a system, it's definitely has gotten better. But I think for sustainable to make an impact, you have to look at the processes, the systems, all the manufacturing that goes into it, and you try incrementally to reduce those things as a start. And then from there, you can get into some big, initiative, mushroom leather, lots of different, like footwear is a great example of being able to use sustainable materials more quickly because of the type of product it is. So hopefully that answers your question. But just know, as a CMF designer, it is you who gets to choose that. And also, like, just as a side note, when I design something, I think about every single person who is designing and working on our project. I've been to the factories so much in my career that I definitely appreciate the workers and the people that create the products, physically. And so when I design something, I'm thinking about them. I'm thinking about, like, how do I design something that is efficient, that doesn't cause a lot of strain, doesn't cause a lot of pain for this poor worker who is, assembling and working on it. And that to me is also sustainability. So I'll leave it with that.
I really like what you said about thinking through the micro steps and incrementally thinking about sustainability. I think that sort of framework really makes a lot of sense, and sort of is sort of a little different from this sort of grand notion of sustainability. It's really the micro steps that can meaningfully contribute.
Yeah, that's where
Um,
you can do it, because the big gestures
yeah.
are, it's like a big boat. It takes a long time to move it, to turn
Mhm.
it.
Yes.
So for me, I like to work within the system that's
Hmm.
already been
Yeah.
there. And I just start with the things that I can affect, that I can accomplish. And then from there, you
Yeah.
gain influence, and then you can change the whole thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Thank you. The
Yeah.
next question I have is to sort of just sort of this is more of a speculative question. I was wondering um, um, what sort of like future consumer mindsets are on the horizon at this moment in time with AI technology and sort of everything. We're in this like moment in history where I think it's really becoming a mush of everything at once. And we were wondering if there's anything you'd like to share about future consumer mindsets and where you see CMFG as a discipline heading towards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think that's a very thoughtful question. I think CMF is only going to expand. When I started in CMF, it was like the very ground stages. Um, I don't know if you've heard of a company called Teague in Seattle. The founder, his last name is Teague. I watched a documentary on him, and he did a lot of CMF way back in the early 1900s. So I think CMF is always going to be there. I think our discipline needs more spotlight. Our discipline needs more visibility because we are really silent in the background, kind of catching all of these things that the people out in front who get a lot of win the awards and get all the credit. They do it with our effort. CMF. Like if you win a Red Dot award, they don't like highlight CMF contribution. I've worked on many products that have won these very influential awards, but never got any credit. It's always the person who creates the lines. Sorry not to be disrespectful, but it's more than that. And I think the fact that CMF is an entire discipline, like it touches on design, it touches on marketing, it touches on engineering, and again, like being critical path within a company, they start realizing it, but I think publicly it's not being talked about, and that's where I come in. I've been using my platform to try to elevate CMF and to give more visibility to what we actually have to do. It's just a little slow going trying to get the videos made. So I think in terms of an industry, it's only going to get better. I think with companies like SpaceX and doing a lot of like what are they calling it, space tourism. All of these different markets. Like it can go in a technological way where you're going to need CMF. And I remember seeing uh, like at SpaceX, like before they didn't have CMF roles, and now they have CMF roles. And it's also getting into like CMF engineering. If you look at Meta as an example, I have friends that work there, and I keep seeing a CMF advanced concepts or advanced engineering. So the term CMF is now being used in all the phases, which I find really really cool, and it's very exciting. But again, the future right now, the last time we had this type of, kind of historical event was during iPhone, so this is the second one that I'm living through. But yeah, I think like technology wise, just, get your skills, just keep, keep going forward, upward and onward. And that's where I see CMF happening. And in terms of the cultural part, global, CMF is becoming a discipline globally, not just in the United States. And that's what I've seen happen more in the last like 10, 20 years.
Thank you, Vivian.
Okay.
That was really, really. Sorry, Annika, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vivian. The whole session, especially your presentation, when we got to know the whole spectrum, because we've been studying CMF from a very visual point of view. We have done a lot of hypothetical trend forecasting, but to
Mhm.
see the whole process and to see everything that goes in it, it was really, really insightful. Sinjoti, you wanted to take up.
No, I just wanted to sort of thank Vivian. I think I mean I'm not a practicing industrial designer, but this was so informative and I learned so much. Um, and I think I really liked your product creation process. Though it was so expensive, and I was thinking about the time when I studied CMF in undergrad, when I was basically the same age as Anika and Urvi, and it was just like one tiny little part of the project, but to sort of learn more about how expensive it is and all that it encompasses has been so wonderful. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to help. I'm glad to share that. because nobody gets to see it. A lot of our work
Thank
is,
you.
under non-disclosure, things like that. So I'm showing old projects, obviously because they've
Yeah.
already happened. But you're very welcome, and anybody who needs mentorship, I'm here. I'm not, I won't take like a flood of calls, but like I am here to help, and help be a bridge in however I can be.
Thank you.
Hmm.
I think Anika and Urvi, over to you for the last segment.
Yeah. Our last segment is the audience questions. So we would open the floor to the audience. While they come up, uh, Vivian, we wanted to ask you one really exciting question that we all had in mind, that if you as a personality would relate yourself with a certain color, material, and finish, what would it be?
That is a really great question. Nobody has asked me that. Ooh. Okay. So, it's really difficult. I think I'm more faceted where some parts of me would have a little bit less or more shine. So, as a color, I think, oh gosh, I think is I will look at it from a personal and a professional. From a professional, I wear black. I am very serious, but my personality, like in terms of my discipline in doing my work, I would say I am like black with a matte finish and, just very sophisticated, with gold trims. But as a person, as a mother, as a wife, as like, just a human, my favorite color is pink. I love pink. And I think like my personality is a little, bubbly at times and things. And yeah, I just feel like it's very like open and warm. And I would do probably the same. I'm a big fan of satin finish, like a 20 to 30, gloss units. So, but yeah, did I answer all the questions? Color, material, finish. Oh, and then material, I'd be flexible. I would be flexible with a little bit advanced rigidity in some spaces because I am very technical. I love the technical part of CMF. I think that is where like if I can just give you one piece of advice, like be very good at color theory, be very good at development because when you can communicate to a factory partner and get something done, you are worth your weight in gold because if you can't get it done, it's not going to launch.
Yes, absolutely. And like you said, we would also totally associate with you with the color pink
Oh,
because you've
thank
been
you.
so sweet and bubbly towards us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have to be a little
Okay.
hard at work, because I have to push.
Mm. No, absolutely. I think we would also take a lot of inspiration from that.
Mm.
Do we have any audience questions?
So, meanwhile, it's really nice absorbing all of this that you have told us. So, I would like to ask you about trend forecasting. As a just, we have kind of seen how it goes in under the process. But like, if we look at it as a back end point of view, like how it's actually done by these specialized firms like WGSN and Pantone that are like totally focusing upon trend forecasting and developing those over. So how that process is actually done and aligned with those companies and doing this whole color material and finish in the process.
Oh, sure. So, most of the bigger companies, like a Nike or the companies that invest in CMF, they're always going to have a trend service. And trend services are basically a group of people, correspondents all over the world who report on the trends in every single continent. And they give you a macro level and they start creating these stories, that help in terms of research. The trend services are great but not everybody can afford them. They're very expensive. So I believe like WGSN is somewhere in like, I'm just going to make a number up, somewhere like $20,000 to $30,000 for 5 seats, you know? So a company really, remember the story about, you know, asking the CEO for, you know, the money, like that's part of that story. Um, if you cannot buy trend services, let's just say you end up going to work for a company and they don't invest in it yet, and you're trying to get them to invest in it. Learning how to do trend research is very helpful. You can do your own trend research. When I worked at Nike, we had the color committee, like I mentioned, but the color committee would work, let's just say, 2 years out. Because I worked in tech, you know, consumer electronics, my creative director asked me to research 5 years out. So how do you research 5 years out? So you start developing your own methods. I'm sure you can learn from other people too, but generally pattern recognition is very good to know, you know, a skill to have. And you can start basically with the runways. You look at fashion. I know like companies don't want to do fashion because fashion is so fast, you know, and they want it to be a stable thing. But there's home fashion, you know, like for example, there's sofas. You know, not everybody's going to get a new sofa every year, you know, not like a t-shirt. So that's where you have to think about timing. Automobiles or, you know, cars, that you buy a new car maybe every 5 years, 10 years, you know, because it's a very expensive, you know, purchase. So, you know, generally in those businesses, the CEO has to get involved with making a decision on the color palette. So, you know, just getting back to research methods, like there are methods that you can use. You could start with fashion, all the runways, and like just look at every single thing. You see the patterns. Oh, just like I think I showed you that one slide with all the color swatches. Like you start looking at things as swatches, like not people. That doesn't sound very offensive, but like you start watching the, you know, the models go down, and you know they have their apparel, and you see like blue, black, yellow, you know, and over time you watch enough of these shows, you see, okay, this is a dominant color. And there are trend services that just only focus on fashion as well. So you can do this, and you can do it for automotive, you can do it for any category. So really it's about like looking backwards and seeing what's been done, looking at present day, seeing how the culture, the economics, we call it socioeconomic, you know, trends. So you're looking at what's going on culturally, socially, as well as economics. Because, you know, maybe it's lower price points are selling at this color, you know, more than the other price points. So a little complicated. Sorry to get into like those complexities, but you can do that. And it's really just logic and pattern recognition. And, you know, like I mentioned, how like, you know, there's fashion, there's automotive, there's homes. If somebody ever argues like, oh, well, that color, you know, how do we know it's going to be good? You know, relevant 5 years from now, it's like, well, you know, in automotive, they use this color for 25 years. Of course, it's going to be great. You know, why would they choose a color, you know, that wouldn't last, or you use that in home interiors? So I just went through that really quickly, but that's generally the method. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. I also liked when you said you have your own process of looking at this. It really again connects back when you were saying that AI can actually not do this, because there is this again sense of personality around that area that is connecting you with all of this going around. So it all makes sense now.
Yeah. And then also the stories that you tell, you know, you get into
Mm.
persona work and things like that. You should start getting into the stories, you know, as well, because creating really good product stories from color, material, finish, and trend, you know, that's also like what the company uses to, for example, it'll make it into a marketing campaign. They'll create ads for it. So I didn't even show you a lot of the things that I've done that have made it into, you know, what the models are wearing on the website photos, you know, just from the persona mood boards that, you know, we created earlier in the process. So yeah, you can create trend reports using whatever you've got. So it's really about telling a good story, and then also having data. Sorry, one last thing. You have to have data always. It's never like, you know, oh, I like it. And this, so I'm just going to get into this really fast. I know we were limited on time, but a lot of times you will be in a meeting with somebody very high up in the organization, like a CEO or a chief marketing officer, and they will say, I do not like that. And it's all preference because their title, they can say, I do not like that. But in your role, you have to say, this is why it will sell because of this data, this data, this data. So a lot of the times I get into fights with people in that position, and you have to learn how to have these conversations because they're difficult. But the data always wins. More so than I just like it. And a lot of times right now, CMF is being done because somebody just likes that color or that finish. There's absolutely no strategy.
Yeah, I think this states that when you said CMF is more than just the stylization, it's more technical. Uh, it'll never be like wordplay. It's always something backing up towards it. Mhm.
Yep,
Yes.
absolutely. And I think like just in anything that you do, if you have the data and you have the facts to back up your concepts, you will do well. I mean, I've been in design reviews where I've my last job mostly first try, first presentation, it got approved. I would reference like people in other disciplines, 30 design reviews, still trying to get approval, and so I think my methodology is why I get approval so quickly.
Then, am I audible?
Oh, hi. I see you.
Yeah, this is Adarsh. I had the question regarding the approach that you took in different projects that you did. So, like, how do you decide the approach that you take throughout the process, and how do you take that forward in the project?
That's a great question. Because in practice, when you have a job, you don't get a project kind of buttoned up that's neat, like you start here, you start at milestone one and you go to the end. A lot of my jobs were like an ambulance driver. I don't know. I don't know if you have like ambulances in India, correct? Right. So a lot of time it's like there's some emergency and I have to show up and the color didn't work out or the chief marketing officer did not like the color palette that the industrial design team selected. There have been so many projects where I enter either in the middle or towards the end. So and a lot of times at my last job, they here in the United States, they have you call 911, for emergency, like I said about the ambulance. So I became like the CMF help desk, like 911, because we had about 100 plus industrial designers, at the design center. And a lot of times they didn't have something that was working out, and even though I wasn't on the project, they tap on my shoulder and say, Vivian, would you please help me? This is not matching at the factory, or whatever. An example of this is this project actually. I have my blurry. This is a paper mate project. You might have this in India, but here are like several colors. It comes in 14 colors. Um, when I got put onto that project, the industrial design team had already been like 3/4 of the way down on this process. They hired all these consultants and then all of these, great people to work on it. But the chief marketing officer did not like it was a senior VP that did not like lots of layers that did not like the palette that the industrial design team was using, and they were just matching the ink color that came inside. And so what I had to do was enter the project even though it was already at the factory, and I had to redesign the palette with a different concept, and then develop all of the materials at the factory and also the inks. So that one was an example of where I came in. I was not even assigned to the project. They ran into some problems after the industrial design was already tooled. And I came in, I worked with the factory and got everything to match. This project I'm extremely proud of because by the time we got everything done, which this was done in Japan, I believe, and I had to bring in a supplier, it was messy. They were able to produce one of these pens every 1.25 seconds to come off of the line. And that to me is mind blowing, the speed that manufacturing goes at. So again, going back to testing the rigors of manufacturing, this is just another example. But I hope that that answered your question. That CMF designers can enter a project at any phase. It just depends when that subject matter expert is needed. Does that help? Sorry. Let me know if you need more details.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey Vivian,
Hi.
so I'm Mansi and I had one more question for you. So there is a lot of contradicting what you say decisions on color of the year, like which is cloud dancer. I would like to know your opinion on it as a CMA designer.
So I'm actually I am I work I'm on the I'm a consultant for Pantone. I just wanted to say that. So I do not work on the color of the year. I work on other stuff, and I with them. Um, but the color of the year. Okay, how do I say this? Each company that has color marketing, which is what we use the term to market the colors that we choose, they have their own point of view. There is Pantone, that is a company that creates color books and color tools. They started in printing, so that's why you see Pantone as the kind of the industry standard. You could work on a desert island and not know anybody, but they will know what a Pantone book is or a PMS book. So that is one segment of the business. They have another segment that does trend reports and things like that. So that is that company, Pantone's point of view to create the color of the year. Um, they have experts, that do the research, that are actually not in the United States. I believe they're in Europe. They're in like England or London. In terms of, they have a whole what do you call it, panel of people that do this. So they have color of the year. WGSN has their color palettes. I'm trying to think who else does color forecasts. I think Pantone though is the only one that does color of the year. Oh, there's Color Marketing Group. That's another color association. So those are kind of the biggest ones. In terms of the color of the year, it is a recommendation. It is a suggestion. It is not, you have to use it. They came up with this story or this narrative because of probably what's going on in the world. When somebody told me what the color was, I was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Even though there was a lot of controversy about it. But to me, when I hear, I haven't been paying attention, but when I heard that it was white, it was like, oh, white space, breathing. Like when you're looking at art, you have like, white space, or you're looking at, a room when it doesn't have a lot of furniture, there's a lot of white space. A museum has a lot of white space. And that is to showcase, the actual object that is in the display. So that's how I took it. I'm sure it went a lot of different directions because it's become very controversial. But um, and for those colors, as an example, there are companies like, nail polish, as an example, they will make it in color of the year and so on. The reason why these are made, number one, you get into a design position. Sometimes you don't know what color to pick, even though it is your responsibility to pick the color. The timing of it, what's going on, the region, where the product's going to be sold. You have to take all of these things into account when you're creating a color palette. And so, for example, white, I think white in India is death. Is that correct? So that is definitely not appropriate for your region. And I look at that as a miss. I know somebody who used to work in mobile phones for Nokia, and I believe like she would not make a white cell phone because that was not a good color for the India market. Just like in China, red is auspicious. There's, so that to me is a color naming. That's a whole other conversation. But when you are picking colors, you want them to be relevant for your region. So going back to the color of the year, WGSN, I will say that um, when companies do not participate in these trends, they are leaving money on the table, if that makes sense. Like, if you can sell this much product and you can sell more by doing WGSN palette and then more by, Pantone color of the year, then you want to follow those suggestions because it's already kind of in the environment, if that makes sense. The product environment. And so that could be a miss as an example. So these are all tools. They're not mandates. They are suggestions based on data and research. So to answer your question, you can use it or you don't have to. You can come up with your own. So it's not the end all be all. And if you choose not to use a Pantone color of the year, your product will still sell. It will be okay. Does that answer your question? You can just thumbs up or whatever. Okay, great.
Yeah, I think I relate to that a lot too. I think before the session, we were thinking about what the topic of the session would be, and we were coming across this statement that do trends follow people or do people follow trends? And that was something that really like left with us. Okay, so we will move forward to the final closing question of the session. Vivian, what is the hardest thing that you learned from your life that you would like us to take away with us today?
Okay. That I love this question. I want everyone to know that I am like you. I was born in the Philippines. I came to the United States as an immigrant. I was not born in this country. And I have been able to work at these gigantic companies influencing the world on consumer buying, purchases, habits, colors. It has been such an honor and it has been quite a surprise to be in this role and doing what I do. Um, and I would like to say that the one thing that I want everybody to walk away from this is that if there is something that you feel very passionately about and it's something you really believe in and you're not hurting anybody, of course, um, you do it, you follow it, you go. Don't let anybody get in your way. Don't let anybody tell you no. No means find another way. If you believe in that so much, and the person in front of you who is supposed to be giving you permission to go, no, go, and if you believe they're wrong because they just don't have the information or whatever the reason is, you keep pushing. Persistence is what gets you here. If you if you turn away with somebody telling you no, you are not going to move forward or upward. And your work and your character, it is what is going to be your like your sign on yourself. Like everybody can read you based on your character, based on what you've done, so I would say that it has nothing to do with school. It just has to do with being a good person. And for somebody who, the thing that I learned, especially at my last job, I had many people who were not in my discipline, who did not have my experience, did not have my background, who were just getting started in their career. Like they literally graduated from college like 5 years ago. And these people were stopping me, telling me that I could not do that, telling me that I was less than them, telling me that I was not um, allowed to do certain things. And I could not even believe that these people grew up this way. And I realized that that was just a culture difference, a difference in domains. It was like a mismatch. And I had to learn because I grew up being a kind of, subordinate, like not being very pushy, and aggressive. I just took a back seat. And over time it would eat at me. And so I learned to get my facts, get my data, get my presentation, rehearse Oh, it looks like we froze a little bit. Hopefully you got that part.
Yes, thank you so much for this. I think it's a great thought for us all to like take away. And I think it'll push us forward and keep us motivated throughout this week. So thank you so much for
Good.
coming.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope
Yeah.
that you all got some reference and gained something from the journey that I've had.
Absolutely. I think for a couple of us who are in third year, this was definitely like a eye opener towards the industry. The rest of them, I think it's a good inspiration to look forward to when the course of CMF comes for them.
Absolutely. And again, you can join CMF. You don't have to be a CMF designer. You can be a CMF engineer. You can be a researcher. There's so many positions now that they have parsed it out and made it into, like instead of one big position, they're smaller. So
Hmm.
there's room for CMF. The future needs CMF designers. Mhm.
Okay. Uh, we will be ending the session now. Thank you so much again, Vivian. The future does need a lot of CMF designers, and I think this session is going to pivot us towards that a bit more. Thank you, Saint Jyoti, for joining us and all of the students sitting there.
Thank you for your time, everyone. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted, Annika. I don't know if you're saying anything.
Yeah, I would also thank Vivian. It was like nice connecting with you over through previous calls also, and you spending time with both of us, like preparing the session, and then today also like we extended it by half an hour when we have informed you about like 1 hour session. It really means a lot of your time.
Of course. I'm happy to
Yeah,
share. Thank you again. This was a great
I think they're frozen. Are they
Oh,
frozen for
there
you
we go.
too?
Yeah, they froze. Oh, there they are again. You were frozen and you're still muted.
hello. No,
Hi, do we say goodbye now?
I think there was some glitch. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, Urvi. So are we finished now?
Yes. Thank
Okay.
you. Good day.
Of course. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.